extent of communist infiltration across the U.S. government and society. But 4 years later, the Senate voted for his condemnation, and the government's initiative to rid itself of communist influence was brought to a halt. This is one of the main reasons for the decline of the United States. The threat of communist infiltration has not lessened since the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. As an example, McCarthy has been demonized by left-wing politicians and the media for ages. Today, McCarthyism is synonymous with political persecution, an indication that the left wing has successfully established dominance in the ideological struggle. The decades of suppression and defamation divvied out to U.S. anti-communist heroes like McCarthy indicate to statistics. The rate of children born out of wedlock in 1940 was 3.8% among all newborns. By 1965, this figure had increased to 7.7%. In 1990, 25 years after the Great Society reform, the figure was 28% and again rose to 40% in 2012. The disintegration of the family brought with it a series of widespread consequences, such as an increased financial burden for the government, a soaring crime rate, the decline of family education, families that are stuck in poverty for generations, and a mentality of entitlement, which led to a higher rate of voluntary unemployment. A quote attributed to Scottish historian and jurist Lord Alexander Fraser Tytler says, quote, "A democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the voters discover that they can vote themselves largesse from the public treasury." From that time on, the majority always votes for the candidate promising the most benefits from the public treasury, with the results that a democracy always collapses over loose fiscal policy, always followed by a dictatorship. As the Chinese saying goes, quote, "From thrift to extravagance is easy, but the opposite is difficult." After people develop a dependence on welfare, it becomes impossible for the government to reduce the scale and types of benefits. The Western welfare state has become a political quagmire for which politicians and officials have no solution. In the 1970s, the extreme left gave up the revolutionary terms that kept the American people on guard and replaced them with the more neutral-sounding liberalism and progressivism. Readers who lived in communist countries are no stranger to the latter, as progress has been used by the Communist Party as a quasi-synonym for communism. For example, the term progressive movement referred to the communist movement, and progressive intellectuals referred to pro-communist individuals or underground members of the Communist Party. Liberalism, meanwhile, is not substantially different from progressivism, as it carries the same connotation of high taxes, expansive welfare, big government, rejection of religion, morality, and tradition, the use of social justice as a political weapon, political correctness, and the militant promotion of feminism, homosexuality, sexual perversity, and the like. We do not intend to point fingers at any political figure or individual, for it is indeed difficult to make correct analysis and judgments in the midst of complex historical developments. It is clear that the specter of communism has been at work in both the East and West since the beginning of the 20th century. When violent revolution succeeded in the East, it spread the influence of communism to the governments and societies of the West, shifting them ever leftward. 4. The Cultural Revolution of the West.
Proper place for it.
China-linked hackers had intercepted surveillance data intended for American law enforcement agencies. The hackers stole U.S. customer call records and communications from a limited number of individuals who are primarily involved in government. That's according to a statement from the FBI and CISA. There were also reports that Chinese hackers targeted telephones belonging to then presidential and vice presidential candidates Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Warner said this is an ongoing effort by China to infiltrate telecom systems around the world for huge amounts of data.
As China seeks to export its surveillance model overseas, are people willing to have their phone calls and messages tapped by a communist regime? NTD Sam Wang was out at the National Mall in D.C. to survey the crowd.
First question, are you familiar with China's social credit score system?
No, no.
No, I have not.
I have not, no. I think I did come across it one time on social media, but I didn't really go too deeply into it.
Basically what that is China is compiling data from their citizens and tracking their behaviors and rank them accordingly. So just wondering, what's your reaction to that?
Oh, it sounds like that's one of those episodes from Black Mirror. Wow, I did not know that was a thing. That's crazy to think that, oh, you're getting scored based off your facial recognition and also everything that you got going on in your life.
It seems quite restrictive. If it were me, I'd feel a little concerned.
So recently the U.S. has found out there's a hacking campaign going around. Basically, they're going around compromising major telecom companies like AT&T, Verizon, and stuff like that. So just wondering, are you concerned that China is tapping into your messages and phone calls?
Yeah, again, it's obviously something to be concerned about, especially being a young teenager with always on our phones, social media, stuff like that.
Well, that's a very interesting question. When we're buying security systems, we have to make sure that those security systems that we buy off of Amazon, they're not using a Chinese cloud.
It's always concerning when someone has your data that you're maybe not willingly giving to them, but also I think the internet these days, nothing is secure.
To be honest, all governments do that.
Do you ever read into China's human rights record? Anything else,
Yes,
Jalen?
I know a lot about the Tiananmen Square and how people are, the Uyghurs in the west are being treated. I'm worried about people there. Don't know whether there's going to happen to people here.
That's a lot of privacy and whatever information that you do throw out there. You could be texting your parents about information on their car, and then just next thing you know, you could just end up with nothing one day. So yeah, I would be definitely concerned if that's the case with China's tapping into our phones.
Taiwanese President William Lai is set to visit the island's last 3 diplomatic allies in the Pacific during a trip beginning next Saturday. That includes the Marshall Islands, Tuvalu, and Palau. Taiwan declined to give details on possible U.S. transit stops along the way. Take a listen.
We are still in the midst of meticulously planning the related stopovers and aren't able to reveal anything more to everyone.
Taiwanese presidents usually use visits to other countries to transit through the U.S., which doesn't have formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan. Beijing is very opposed to any interaction between U.S. and Taiwan leaders. The Chinese Communist Party claims Taiwan as its own and has vowed to take it under by force if necessary. China has staged military drills around Taiwan after presidential stopovers in the U.S. Under pressure from the Chinese regime, some countries have cut ties with Taiwan. The island only has formal diplomatic relations with 12 countries. A congressional commission says the U.S. should boost future arms sales to Taiwan to help build deterrence against China. The commission suggests adding Taiwan to NATO Plus, a list of countries that stand beside the world's biggest military alliance. NTD's Joy Chu reports from Taiwan.
This would add Taiwan to sort of the most elite category of security assistance partners and ease the process of export control review on potential transfers to Taiwan.
The U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission under the Congress said in its annual report that the U.S. should amend the Arms Export Control Act to include Taiwan on the list of NATO Plus recipients. The commission was created by Congress to provide recommendations about China to Congress.
In 2024, China tried to influence Taiwan's democratic elections, and PLA aircraft have already violated Taiwan's air defense identification zone over 2,300 times, the highest number on record.
Taiwan remains a potential flashpoint in the tensions between the U.S. and China. Beijing has repeatedly threatened to bring Taiwan under their control by force if necessary. Reporting from Taiwan, Joy Chu, NTD News.
Right now, any arms sales to Taiwan exceeding $14 million must be reported to Congress. But if Taiwan is accepted into NATO Plus, the threshold for notifying Congress will be raised to $25 million. Coming up, workers at a famous cognac brand in France protest a plan to bottle the spirit in China. Unions fear job losses and say it's a threat to the industry's heritage.
Yeah, it is.
Over 100 workers block a highway in China, the leading financial hub, Shanghai. They're protesting after going 10 months without pay. And a powerful forum on Capitol Hill is celebrating a milestone. 440 million people have now quit the Chinese Communist Party. This comes 2 decades after a groundbreaking editorial series sparked the movement. More on the event after the break here on China in Focus.
It's about the ecosystems. Everything that's needed to make anything, the entire supply chain, it's already here. And once things are made, China has the means to move merchandise quickly. A key goal of Trump's threatened tariffs is to bring more jobs and industries back to the U.S. But look at all of this merchandise. China's system has a grip on the world, and unseating it as a top maker and seller, it's a task much easier said than done.
Cognac workers in
خشكو دايبانيز ديما كارك الدور دور لهمو چند ديمقراطي وموافقاني مرور وإنسانية او بارو خيك استهيا بتايبان لإيرا بسوريا بشي كده جرد وقاو على نيكا إدارة إيبوماكر
هفتروش منذ 12 سنة تامبون كراقوتينيز قديا بما من شكل بحر في ذنب باوان رحمنا ودم سوالم مخدران مثل باوان المستم بس هنا بس ناش بجوش بقى